Alex's son beat down mercilessly as I pulled my truck into the driveway 3 hours earlier than expected. Johnson had called off the rest of the day's work after the concrete delivery got delayed again. Normally, I'd have been annoyed. Time off meant money lost. But today, that unexpected free afternoon would change the course of my life forever. I sat in my truck for a moment, looking at our modest 2-story house. Elizabeth and I had bought it 5 years ago, right after we got married. Back then, her eyes had lit up as we walked through each room, imagining our future together. Now those same eyes barely acknowledged my presence when I walked through the door each evening. 5 years, I muttered to myself, gripping the steering wheel tighter. 5 years down the drain. But I didn't know just how true those words were. Not yet. The front door was unlocked as usual. Elizabeth's car was in the driveway, so she was home, probably on one of her endless phone calls with her friends. I stepped quietly into the foyer, dropping my keys into the ceramic bowl she'd bought during our honeymoon in Santa Fe. My boots were caked with dried mud, so I slipped them off before walking further in. That's when I heard her voice floating down from our bedroom upstairs. "God, Richard, I can't wait to see you again," she said, her tone light and flirtatious, a tone I hadn't heard directed at me in months. "No, he won't suspect a thing. He never does." I froze, my hand gripping the banister. My heartbeat thundered in my ears, but I forced myself to remain silent, to listen. 3 weeks in California, just you and me," she continued. "I've already told him I need time for myself. Some garbage about finding my center or whatever." A pause, she laughed. That throaty laugh that used to be reserved for our private moments. "No, Richard, he doesn't question anything I tell him. That's what makes it so easy and so suffocating." Another pause. I know, his presence irritates me now. Everything about him, the way he eats, the way he breathes, his stupid stories about work. I wish he'd disappear forever. Just vanish, you know? Then we wouldn't have to sneak around anymore. The words struck me like physical blows, each one landing with precision. 5 years of marriage reduced to irritation and contempt. My chest tightened, and for a moment I couldn't breathe. The world tilted sideways and I gripped the banister harder to keep myself upright. But I didn't make a sound. I didn't storm upstairs to confront her. Something cold and calculating had awakened inside me, a survival instinct I didn't know I possessed. I stood there listening to my wife plot the dissolution of our life together, and all I felt was a strange, detached clarity. "I'll call you back tonight when he's asleep," Elizabeth was saying. "Love you too, babe." I moved then, quietly retreating to the front door. I opened it, then closed it loudly. "Elizabeth, I'm home. Early," I called out, injecting false cheerfulness into my voice. There was a brief silence, then the sound of movement upstairs. "Michael, what are you doing home?" She appeared at the top of the stairs, her face composed, but her eyes wary. She was beautiful, even now. Auburn hair falling in waves past her shoulders, green eyes that could shift from warm to ice cold in seconds. Today they were glacial. "Concrete delivery got delayed," I said, shrugging. "Johnson sent us home. Thought we could grab an early dinner, maybe?" She descended the stairs, her hand trailing along the banister where mine had just been. "I can't tonight, sorry. I promised Mom I'd help her with some stuff for the church fundraiser." Another lie, smooth and practiced. "No problem," I said, matching her casualness. "I'll grab something on my way to poker night with the guys then." Relief flickered across her face. "That sounds perfect. Don't wait up for me, okay?" I nodded, watching as she grabbed her purse and car keys. She brushed her lips against my cheek, a gesture as empty as our marriage had become, and was gone in a swirl of expensive perfume. I stood in the silent house, my hands curled into fists so tight my knuckles turned white. Then very deliberately, I relaxed them. There would be time for anger later. Right now, I needed to think. I walked slowly through the house, seeing it through new eyes. The framed wedding photos on the wall, the matching coffee mugs in the kitchen cabinet, the throw pillows she'd insisted we needed for the couch. All the trappings of a shared life, a partnership, all lies. In the living room, I poured myself 2 fingers of whiskey and sat down, mind racing. How long had it been going on? Who was this Richard? How many other lies had she told me? The questions swirled, but ultimately they didn't matter. The only thing that mattered was what I would do now. By the time Elizabeth returned home that night, smelling faintly of cigarettes and wearing fresh lipstick, though she claimed not to smoke, and her fundraiser story shouldn't have required makeup touch-ups, I had made my decision. I would not confront her. I would not beg for explanations or apologies. I would simply disappear, just as she wished, but I would do it on my terms. The next few days passed in a strange, suspended reality. I went to work, came home, ate dinner, watched TV, all the normal routines of our life together. But inside I was taking inventory, making plans, preparing. Elizabeth seemed to notice nothing amiss. If anything, she appeared relieved by my emotional distance, mistaking it for the passive acceptance she'd come to expect from me. Tuesday night, I pretended to fall asleep early, then listened as she slipped out of bed and down the hall to the guest bathroom. I heard her hushed voice, the occasional laugh, the intimate tone she used with him. I memorized every word, not for leverage or revenge, but as confirmation that my decision was the right one. He's been acting strange, she whispered at one point. Distant. Do you think he suspects something? A pause. No, you're right. He's not that observant. Still, I'll be glad when this is all over, when I can just tell him I want out. Another pause. 3 more days, baby. Then 3 weeks of just us. I can't wait. I closed my eyes, her words washing over me like acid. 3 days. She was planning to tell me after her retreat, to blindside me with divorce papers probably. Little did she know I was already 10 steps ahead of her. On Wednesday evening, she dropped her bombshell over the chicken parmesan I'd made for dinner. Michael, I've been thinking, she said, pushing her food around her plate. I need some time away for myself. I took a sip of water, my eyes never leaving hers. Oh? Yes, she continued, gaining confidence at my apparent lack of resistance. I've been feeling stifled lately. I think 3 weeks in California would do me good. Clear my head, you know. I set my glass down carefully. California's expensive. She waved her hand dismissively. I've saved up, and I can stay with Amanda for part of it. Another lie. Amanda had moved to Seattle last year. When were you thinking of going? I asked, my voice neutral. This Saturday. She watched me cautiously, waiting for an objection, a confrontation, anything that would confirm her view of me as controlling or difficult. Instead, I nodded. Good timing. Weather should be nice there. I took another bite of my dinner. Do you want me to drive you to the airport? Relief and triumph mingled on her face, poorly concealed. Would you? That would be so helpful. No problem, I said, offering her a smile that didn't reach my eyes. You deserve some time for yourself. Later that night, as she slept beside me, as far away on her side of the bed as possible, I stared at the ceiling and began to solidify my plan. My hands trembled slightly, but my resolve was firm. I thought back to when we first met, at a mutual friend's barbecue. Elizabeth had been vibrant, laughing, the center of attention. I'd been drawn to her like a moth to a flame, and for the first few years our marriage had been good. Not perfect, but good. We talked about children, a bigger house, growing old together. When had it all changed? When had I become someone whose presence irritated her? When had she started looking elsewhere for happiness? These questions kept me awake until dawn, but by morning I'd set them aside. The why didn't matter anymore, only the what next. Thursday morning I called in sick to work for the first time in 3 years. As soon as Elizabeth left for her job at the real estate office, I sprang into action. First I contacted Mark Thompson, a high school friend who had gone into real estate and specialized in quick sales. When I explained my situation, minus the sordid details, he'd whistled low but promised to help. We're listed at slightly below market value, he explained during our meeting at his office. In this neighborhood, with these features, it'll be snapped up within days. Cash offers only to expedite the process. How fast can we close? I asked, signing the paperwork he'd placed in front of me. 10 days minimum, he said, but we might get lucky. Spring market is hot right now. I nodded. And everything can be done with just my signature? Mark looked uncomfortable. Both names are on the deed, Michael, but if you have power of attorney, I slid a document across the desk. Joint power of attorney, signed when we refinanced last year. We both have it for each other, for situations exactly like this, when one of us needs to act for both. He reviewed it carefully. This works. But Michael, are you sure about this? This is your home. Not anymore, I said quietly. It stopped being a home a while ago. Mark nodded, understanding in his eyes. He'd gone through a messy divorce himself a few years back. I'll make some calls today. We could have the first showing as early as Saturday afternoon. Perfect, I said. She leaves that morning. Next, I went to our bank and opened a new individual account, then transferred exactly half of our joint savings into it. Not a penny more, despite the temptation. I wanted to be above reproach when this was all over. Then I drove to AutoNation to discuss selling Elizabeth's prized BMW, which was in both our names, another item she'd insisted on when we were doing better financially. I got a fair offer, enough to pay off the remaining loan with a small amount left over. I'd sign it over the day she left. My final stop was at the office of Jeff Simmons, an attorney I'd met through work who specialized in divorce cases. I laid everything out for him, the affair, the house sale, the car, the bank accounts. You've been thorough, Jeff said, impressed. Most people come in here emotional, unprepared. You've already done half my job for me. I've had a lot of time to think, I replied. I want this clean and quick. No dragging it out. Jeff nodded, making notes. Texas is a community property state, so the split you're proposing is fair. Half the assets to each party. No spousal support, no children to complicate matters. He looked up at me. I can have the paperwork ready by Friday. You said she's leaving Saturday? Yes, for 3 weeks. Perfect timing. We'll file while she's gone. She'll be served when she returns. As I left Jeff's office, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. The machinery was in motion now. There was no turning back. That evening, Elizabeth was unusually attentive, almost affectionate. She suggested we watch a movie together, even curled up against me on the couch like she used to. The irony wasn't lost on me. Now that she thought she was about to be free of me, she could afford to be kind. I played along, wrapping my arm around her shoulders, laughing at the right moments in the comedy she'd chosen. Inside, though, I felt nothing. The woman in my arms was a stranger to me now, someone who wished for my disappearance while planning her escape with another man. This is nice, she murmured at one point, looking up at me with eyes that almost seemed sincere. We should do this more often. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. More often? There would be no more often. This was the last movie we would ever watch together, the last time we would sit on this couch, in this house, pretending to be a couple. She mistook my silence for contentment, snuggling closer. I'm going to miss you, you know, while I'm in California. Another lie to add to the pile. I wondered briefly if she even knew she was lying anymore, or if deception had become so natural to her that the lines between truth and falsehood had blurred beyond recognition. Friday was my last day at Walker Construction, though no one there knew it yet. I spent it saying quiet goodbyes, memorizing the familiar sights and sounds of the place where I'd worked for the last 8 years. My boss, Tony, clapped me on the back as I left. Have a good weekend, Mike, he said, and don't worry about the Peterson job. We'll get it back on schedule next week. I nodded, knowing I wouldn't be there to see it. Thanks, Tony, for everything. He gave me an odd look but didn't press the issue. I'd left a sealed envelope on his desk with my resignation letter inside to be opened Monday morning. It explained that I'd taken a job out of state and had to leave immediately due to personal circumstances. Not the whole truth, but enough. Friday night, I made Elizabeth her favorite dinner, steak, medium rare, with roasted potatoes and asparagus. I opened a bottle of the expensive Cabernet she loved. She seemed surprised by the gesture, even momentarily guilty, but quickly rationalized it away. What's the occasion? She asked, taking a sip of her wine. Just thought you deserved a nice send-off, I replied. Big trip tomorrow. That's really sweet, Michael. She hesitated, then reached across the table to squeeze my hand. You've been so understanding about this. I squeezed back, ignoring the sick feeling in my stomach at her touch. I want you to be happy, Elizabeth. Something flickered in her eyes, perhaps a moment of genuine remorse, but it was gone as quickly as it appeared. I know you do. We finished dinner in relative silence, and afterward, she went upstairs to continue packing while I cleaned the kitchen. Every dish I put away, every surface I wiped clean, felt like the closing of a chapter. By the time I turned off the lights downstairs, I had mentally said goodbye to the house that had once held all my hopes for the future. In our bedroom, Elizabeth was carefully folding lingerie into her suitcase, lace and silk items I hadn't seen in months. reserved now for Richard's eyes only. She quickly covered them when I entered. Another small deception in a sea of larger ones. Almost done packing? I asked casually, changing into my sleep clothes. Almost, she replied, zipping the suitcase closed. Just a few toiletries in the morning. We got into bed, the space between us wide as a canyon. As I turned off the lamp, Elizabeth spoke into the darkness. Michael, thank you for understanding about this trip. I know it might seem selfish, but I really think it will be good for me. For us, even. I stared at the ceiling, invisible in the dark. I hope you find what you're looking for, Elizabeth. She reached across the bed, her hand finding mine. I already have everything I need. This is just a little break. To clear my head. My throat tightened at the ease with which she lied. Even now, even about this. I forced myself to squeeze her hand in response, then turned on my side, away from her. Good night, Elizabeth. Good night, Michael. As her breathing deepened into sleep, I remained awake, counting the hours until morning, until this charade could finally end. Saturday morning dawned bright and clear. Elizabeth was practically vibrating with excitement as she wheeled her suitcase downstairs. She wore her traveling outfit, designer jeans, a silk blouse, and the gold necklace I'd given her for our 3rd anniversary. The sight of it around her neck made me want to rip it off, but I maintained my calm facade. Ready? I asked, taking her suitcase and loading it into my truck. I'd sold her BMW the previous afternoon, but she hadn't noticed its absence in the garage yet. More than ready, she said, climbing into the passenger seat. God, 3 weeks of freedom. The slip made me glance sharply at her, but she seemed unaware of what she'd revealed. Freedom. That's what this was to her. Freedom from me, from our marriage, from the life we'd built together. The drive to Austin Bergstrom International Airport took 45 minutes. Elizabeth filled it with chatter about the places she planned to visit in California. Napa Valley, San Francisco, Big Sur, all the while checking her phone constantly, no doubt messaging Richard about their imminent reunion. You've got everything mapped out, I observed, keeping my voice neutral. Sounds like quite the itinerary. She laughed, the sound artificial to my ears now. Well, you know me, always the planner. I did know her, or I thought I had. Now I wondered if I'd ever really known her at all. When we arrived at the departures terminal, I pulled up to the curb and got out to retrieve her suitcase from the back. Here you go, I said, extending the handle for her. Have a great trip. She looked at me with that same patronizing smile she'd worn for months. Thanks. Don't wait up for me when I get back. My flight gets in late. I won't, I assured her, the double meaning of my words lost on her. She leaned in for her customary peck on the cheek, but I turned my head slightly so that her lips met the corner of my mouth instead. The small gesture seemed to unnerve her. Goodbye, Elizabeth, I said, meeting her eyes directly. For what I knew would be the last time. Something in my tone must have registered because she paused, studying my face. Is everything okay, Michael? I smiled, feeling the weight of years lifting from my shoulders. Everything's perfect. Enjoy California. She nodded, still looking uncertain, then turned and wheeled her suitcase toward the terminal doors. I watched her go. This woman I had once loved more than life itself, now a stranger to me. She didn't look back. The moment her figure disappeared inside the terminal, I pulled out my phone and made 3 calls in quick succession. First to Mark Thompson, confirming our house showing that afternoon. Second to my lawyer, Jeff Simmons, initiating the divorce proceedings we discussed. And third to my new boss, Dave Harrington at Mountain Ridge Construction in Boulder, Colorado, confirming I'd be taking the job offer I'd secretly applied for and interviewed for over the past 2 weeks. Glad to hear it, Michael, Dave said. When can you start? I can be there by Tuesday, I replied, already pulling away from the curb, away from the airport, away from my old life. Perfect. We'll have everything ready for you. Operation Disappear had officially begun. By the time Elizabeth's plane touched down in Los Angeles, I had already shown our house to 4 potential buyers. The young couples and growing families who walked through our rooms had no idea of the drama unfolding within these walls. They saw only the gleaming hardwood floors, the updated kitchen, the spacious backyard, not the betrayal, the lies, the slow death of a marriage. By Sunday evening, we had 3 offers, all cash, all above asking price. I accepted the highest one with a 7-day closing period. Mark was impressed. Told you the market was hot, he said as we finalized the paperwork. But even I didn't expect this kind of response. You sure you want to move forward this quickly? Positive, I replied. The sooner the better. Monday morning, I visited our bank and withdrew my half of the joint accounts, leaving her half untouched. I opened a new account at a different bank and arranged for my future payments to be deposited there. Then I went to the county clerk's office and filed the divorce papers Jeff had prepared, citing irreconcilable differences. Since Texas is a community property state, the division was relatively straightforward. The house proceeds would be split evenly. The car loan was paid off. Our retirement accounts would remain separate, as they had always been. I asked for nothing else, not even the furniture. I wanted a clean break, a complete severing of ties. That afternoon, I started the process of disconnecting my life from Elizabeth's. I canceled my cell phone plan and got a new number. I changed my email password and set up an auto response directing all messages to my new address. I notified the post office to forward only my mail to a P.O. box I'd opened in Boulder. One by one, I cut the threads that bound us together, leaving nothing but the legal documents that would soon dissolve the final tie. By Wednesday, I had rented a small storage unit and begun packing my personal belongings. Clothes, tools, books, the few family heirlooms I'd inherited from my grandparents. Everything else, the furniture we'd chosen together, the artwork she'd insisted on, the expensive kitchen gadgets that rarely got used, I left behind. Each item I packed felt like shedding a layer of my old self, making room for whoever I would become in Colorado. The process was therapeutic, cathartic. I found myself humming as I worked, a lightness in my step that had been absent for months. Thursday afternoon, I drove to her parents' house in the quiet suburb where Elizabeth had grown up. Robert and Margaret Davis had always been kind to me, even if their daughter had not. They deserved an explanation, however brief. Margaret answered the door, her face lighting up at the sight of me. "Michael, what a nice surprise. Come in, come in." Their house was warm and inviting, much like they were. Robert was in his usual armchair, reading glasses perched on his nose as he worked on a crossword puzzle. "Michael," he boomed, setting aside his newspaper. "To what do we owe the pleasure?" I took a deep breath. "I've come to drop some things off and to say goodbye." Their expressions shifted from welcome to confusion. "Goodbye?" Margaret repeated. "What do you mean?" "Elizabeth and I are getting divorced," I said simply. "I've filed the papers. They'll be delivered to her when she returns from California." Silence fell over the room. Robert removed his glasses slowly. "Son, what happened?" I hadn't planned to tell them the whole truth, but standing there faced with their genuine concern, I found I couldn't lie. "Elizabeth has been having an affair. She's in California with him now. She told him she wishes I would disappear forever." Margaret's hand flew to her mouth. Robert's face darkened with anger. "I overheard her on the phone," I continued. "It's been going on for some time, I think. I'm not sure how long." "Michael, we had no idea," Margaret said, tears filling her eyes. "Are you sure? Maybe there's been a misunderstanding." "There's no misunderstanding," I said gently. "She's been unhappy for a long time. She just never bothered to tell me directly." Robert stood, his face flushed. "This isn't right. You two need to talk this through. When she gets back, I'll be gone," I interrupted. "The house is sold. The divorce papers are filed. There's nothing left to say." "Where will you go?" Margaret asked, her voice small. "Colorado," I replied. "I've taken a job with a construction company in Boulder. It's a fresh start." The three of us sat in silence for a moment, absorbing the finality of it all. Then I reached for the boxes I'd brought in. "These are Elizabeth's things," I explained. "Personal items, family photos, her jewelry, things she might want. I'd appreciate if you'd give them to her when she returns." Margaret nodded mutely, tears streaming down her face now. I pulled an envelope from my pocket, and this is a letter explaining everything. Not that she deserves an explanation, but it felt necessary. Robert took it, his hand trembling slightly. "Son, I don't know what to say. This isn't how we raised her to behave." "I know," I said, standing to leave. "You're good people. I'm sorry it ended this way." Margaret rushed forward to embrace me. "This isn't goodbye forever, is it? You're family to us." I hugged her back, feeling a lump form in my throat. "I'll keep in touch, I promise." Robert shook my hand firmly, then pulled me into a bear hug. You take care of yourself out there, Michael. And remember, our door is always open to you. As I drove away from their house, I glanced in the rearview mirror to see them standing in the doorway, Robert's arm around Margaret's shoulders. Another chapter closed. Friday was moving day. The house sale had closed in record time, thanks to Mark's efficiency and the cash offer. The new owners, a young couple expecting their first child, would take possession the following Monday. I had the weekend to finish clearing out my belongings. It didn't take long. Most of my life fit into the back of my truck and a small U-Haul trailer. By Saturday afternoon, I was done. I stood in the empty living room, memories washing over me. Elizabeth and I dancing after we first got the keys, hosting Thanksgiving dinner for both our families, countless movie nights on the couch that was now gone. All those moments felt like they had happened to someone else in another lifetime. I walked through each room one final time, saying my goodbyes. In our bedroom, no, the master bedroom, I placed a small box on the bare mattress. Inside was my wedding ring and a note that simply read, "You wished I would disappear forever. Wish granted." Then I walked out, locked the door, and slid the keys through the mail slot for the new owners to find on Monday. That night I stayed in a hotel on the outskirts of town. My truck was packed, my route to Colorado mapped out, my new apartment in Boulder secured through a virtual tour. As I lay in the anonymous hotel bed, I felt a strange mixture of grief, relief, and anticipation. The life I had known was over, but a new one stretched before me, full of possibilities. My phone had been buzzing intermittently all evening. Elizabeth's parents, no doubt, trying to reach me after processing what I told them. I turned it off. There would be time for conversations later, after the dust had settled. Right now, I needed the silence. Sunday morning, I rose before dawn, checked out of the hotel, and hit the road. As I crossed the state line into New Mexico, watching the Texas landscape recede in my rearview mirror, I finally allowed myself to feel the full weight of what had happened, and what I had done in response. Elizabeth had betrayed me, in the most profound way possible. She had taken my love, my trust, my very presence in her life, and dismissed it all as irritating, suffocating, something to be escaped. She had wished for my disappearance while plotting her future with another man. And now she would get exactly what she had wished for. The complete, total absence of Michael James Walker from her life. No house, no joint accounts, no shared future. Just divorce papers and empty rooms where our life together had once been. I imagined her return from California. Tan, relaxed, probably already planning how to tell me she wanted a divorce. The shock when she found strangers living in our house. The panic when her key wouldn't work. The confusion when she called my phone only to find the number disconnected. I imagined her driving to her parents' house, expecting sympathy and shelter, only to be confronted with the truth of her betrayal and the consequences of her actions. The boxes of her belongings. The letter explaining what I had overheard and what I had done in response. The reality that the man she had so casually dismissed had finally stood up for himself in the most complete way possible. The sun rose higher in the sky as I drove, illuminating the red rock formations of the New Mexico desert. Ahead lay Colorado, with its mountains and rivers and the job that awaited me. Behind lay the ruins of a marriage that had died long before I had the courage to bury it. For the first time in months, I felt myself smile, a genuine smile that reached my eyes and lightened my heart. Elizabeth had wished for my disappearance, thinking me too weak, too compliant to ever take control of my own destiny. How wrong she had been. While I drove toward my new life, Elizabeth was likely saying goodbye to Richard in their California hotel room, preparing for her return to what she thought was still our shared life. She would board her plane with no inkling that the world she was flying back to had been utterly transformed in her absence. Her flight would land at 11:45 p.m. By that time, I would be settling into a motel in Colorado, hundreds of miles and a lifetime away. The first inkling that something was wrong would come when she tried to call me to pick her up from the airport. The disconnected number would puzzle her, but she would rationalize it. Perhaps I had forgotten to pay the bill, or my phone had broken. She would take a taxi home. But home wouldn't exist anymore. She would arrive at our address to find the locks changed, her key useless. If she knocked, strangers would answer. If she peered through the windows, she would see empty rooms or unfamiliar furniture. Panic would set in then. Where was I? Where were her things? What had happened? She would call her parents next, frantic and confused. They would tell her to come over immediately. And there, in her childhood home, surrounded by boxes of her own belongings, she would read my letter and finally understand. I had disappeared, forever, just as she had wished. But it wasn't the passive disappearance of a man slinking away in defeat. It was the decisive action of a man reclaiming his dignity, his future, his very sense of self. As I crossed into Colorado, the Rocky Mountains rising majestically on the horizon, I felt a chapter of my life conclusively end. The pain wasn't gone. Betrayal of that magnitude leaves scars that take years to fade. But it no longer defined me. Elizabeth had wished me gone, thinking it would free her to pursue happiness with Richard. Instead, she would return to find herself alone, her secrets exposed, her carefully constructed double life in shambles. And I would be gone, truly gone, building a new life in a place where the air was cleaner, the views more spectacular, and the memories not yet formed. That night, as I checked into a modest motel in Boulder, my phone long since deactivated and a new one purchased. I wondered if Elizabeth's plane had landed yet, if she had discovered the first pieces of the puzzle I had left for her, if she understood yet the magnitude of what her casual cruelty had cost her. I slept soundly for the first time in weeks, dreamless and at peace. The following morning, I reported for my first day at Mountain Ridge Construction. My new boss, Dave Harrington, greeted me with a firm handshake and a tour of the facility. The company specialized in eco-friendly mountain homes, the kind of craftsmanship that required skill and attention to detail. It was exactly the fresh challenge I had been looking for. "We're glad to have you on board, Michael," Dave said as he introduced me to the crew. "Your portfolio was impressive. Those custom cabinets you designed for the Anderson project. That's the kind of quality we're known for here." I felt a surge of pride. In Texas, working alongside men who had known me for years, my skills had been taken for granted. Here I was being valued from day one. "Thanks for the opportunity," I replied. "I'm looking forward to proving myself." The day passed in a blur of new faces, procedures, and projects. By the time I clocked out at 5 p.m., I was exhausted but satisfied. This was what starting over looked like. Hard work, new challenges, the chance to define myself on my own terms. My apartment was small but functional, a one-bedroom unit in a complex favored by young professionals and graduate students from the nearby university. I had rented it sight unseen based on photos and a virtual tour, but it exceeded my expectations. The large windows offered views of the mountains, and the neighborhood was walkable and lively. That evening, as I unpacked the essentials and ordered pizza from a local place recommended by a coworker, my thoughts drifted back to Texas. Elizabeth would have discovered everything by now. The house, the car, the divorce papers, the complete dismantling of the life she had taken for granted. Part of me wished I could see her face when reality hit her, not out of cruelty, but out of a desire for justice, for her to feel even a fraction of the pain and disorientation she had caused me. But that was the old Michael thinking, the one who had defined himself in relation to Elizabeth's approval or disappointment. The new Michael, the one unpacking boxes in a Boulder apartment with a view of the Flatirons, didn't need that validation. The act of walking away had been cathartic enough. My revenge, if you could call it that, wasn't in hurting Elizabeth, but in refusing to let her hurt me anymore. Meanwhile, in Texas, Elizabeth's world had imploded spectacularly. Her flight had landed at Austin Bergstrom International Airport at 11:45 p.m., as scheduled. She'd been tired but happy, her skin sun-kissed from 3 weeks of California sunshine. Her mind filled with memories of lazy days with Richard in luxury hotels and vineyards. She'd texted me from the plane. "Just landed. Can you pick me up? Terminal 2. When I didn't respond, she tried calling. The automated message, "The number you have dialed is no longer in service," had puzzled her, but she'd assumed it was a temporary glitch. She called an Uber instead, giving the driver our address without a second thought. The first real shock had come when the car pulled up to the house. The lights were on, and through the window she could see unfamiliar furnishings. A child's playpen in the living room, a woman moving about the kitchen. "This isn't right," Elizabeth had told the driver. "There must be some mistake." But there was no mistake. The house number matched. The street was correct. This was our house, the house we'd bought together, The house she'd left just 3 weeks ago. But it wasn't ours anymore. In a panic, she'd tried her key. It didn't work. The locks had been changed. She'd rung the doorbell, heart racing, hands shaking. A young woman had answered, a baby on her hip. "Can I help you?" "This is my house," Elizabeth had stammered. "I live here. Where's Michael? Where's my husband?" The woman's expression had shifted from wariness to pity. "I'm sorry, but you must be mistaken. My husband and I just bought this house. We moved in yesterday." "That's impossible," Elizabeth had insisted, her voice rising. "I live here with my husband. We've lived here for 5 years." "The previous owner was named Michael, yes," the woman had said carefully. "But he sold us the house. The deal closed last week." Elizabeth had stood there, her suitcase at her feet, unable to process what she was hearing. "That's not possible. I'm his wife. He couldn't sell the house without me." The woman had glanced back into the house, clearly uncomfortable. "I'm sorry, but it's very late. I think you should call someone. Family, maybe? Or the police if you're in trouble." And then she had closed the door, leaving Elizabeth alone on the porch of what had once been her home. In a daze, Elizabeth had called her parents. Margaret had answered on the first ring, as if she'd been waiting for the call. "Mom," Elizabeth had choked out, "something's wrong. The house? There are strangers living there. Michael's phone is disconnected. I don't understand what's happening." "Elizabeth," Margaret had said, her voice strained, "you need to come over, right now. We need to talk." The ride to her parents' house had been the longest 20 minutes of Elizabeth's life. Her mind raced with possibilities, each more alarming than the last. Had Michael been hurt? Killed? Had we been robbed? Our identities stolen? None of the scenarios made sense. When she'd arrived at her childhood home, her parents had been waiting in the living room. The tension in the air was palpable. "Mom, Dad, what's going on?" Elizabeth had demanded. "Where's Michael? What happened to our house?" Robert had stood, his face a mask of disappointment and anger. "Sit down, Elizabeth." She'd sunk onto the couch, legs suddenly weak. "You're scaring me. Just tell me what's happening." Margaret had taken a deep breath. "Michael was here last week. He brought these." She gestured to a stack of boxes in the corner of the room. "Your things, and this." She handed Elizabeth an envelope. With trembling hands, Elizabeth had opened it. Inside was a letter and a copy of divorce papers. Already filed, already in process. "Divorce papers?" she'd whispered, shock giving way to disbelief. "This is insane. He can't just—" "Read the letter, Elizabeth," Robert had said firmly. And so she had, her eyes scanning the pages as her world collapsed around her. "Elizabeth, by the time you read this, I will be gone. Not temporarily, not on a break, but permanently. 2 weeks ago, I came home early and overheard your conversation with Richard. I heard every word, every cruel, dismissive, contemptuous word, including your wish that I would disappear forever. Consider your wish granted. The house is sold. Your half of the proceeds has been deposited in your individual account. The car has been sold and the loan paid off. The joint accounts have been divided equally. The divorce papers have been filed. I've accepted a job in another state. In short, I've disappeared from your life, just as you wanted. And while you were enjoying your 3 weeks of freedom in California with Richard, I was busy ensuring that your wish would become permanent. You once told me I was too passive, too accommodating. You were right. I should have stood up for myself long ago. I should have demanded the respect that every human being deserves, especially from their spouse. But I'm not passive anymore. I refuse to be the man you can betray, insult, and discard when convenient. I refuse to be the afterthought in my own marriage. So goodbye, Elizabeth. I hope freedom from my irritating presence brings you the happiness you thought it would. Michael. The letter had fallen from her numb fingers. She looked up at her parents, expecting sympathy, support, reassurance that this could all be fixed. Instead, she'd met Robert's stern gaze and Margaret's tear-filled eyes and understood that they knew everything. He told you, she'd said, her voice hollow. Yes, Robert had replied. He told us that our daughter, whom we raised to be honest and loyal, has been having an affair. That she told her lover she wishes her husband would disappear forever. Is it true, Elizabeth? Look me in the eye and tell me the truth for once. She couldn't. The weight of her actions, laid bare in Michael's letter and her father's disappointed eyes, had crashed down on her. She'd begun to sob, ugly, heaving cries that shook her entire body. I didn't mean it, she'd managed between sobs. I didn't mean for him to hear that. It was just talk, just stupid talk. But you said it, Margaret had pressed. You said those words about a man who loved you, who built a life with you. Elizabeth had no defense, no justification that wouldn't sound hollow and self-serving, so she just nodded, acknowledging the truth of her betrayal. Where is he? She'd asked finally, wiping at her tears. I need to talk to him, to explain. He's gone, Elizabeth, Robert had said flatly. Left the state, started a new job. He didn't say where, and frankly, I don't blame him. But I need to find him, she'd insisted. This is all a mistake, a misunderstanding. If I could just talk to him. It's not a misunderstanding, Margaret had interrupted, her voice uncharacteristically harsh. He heard you wish he would disappear forever, and he granted that wish. What part of that is unclear? Elizabeth had stared at her mother, shocked by her tone. Margaret had always been her defender, her ally, but not this time. The boxes in the corner are your things from the house, Robert had continued. Personal items, family photos, jewelry. The rest was left for the new owners or sold with the house. The reality of her situation had begun to sink in. No house, no husband, no Richard either. Once he learned she had nothing left to offer. Just boxes of belongings and the crushing knowledge that she had destroyed her own life through selfishness and casual cruelty. What am I supposed to do now? She'd asked, her voice small. You can stay here for a while, Margaret had said, though her tone made it clear this was a concession, not a welcome. Until you figure out your next steps. And Elizabeth, Robert had added, his voice stern, this Richard person is not welcome in this house. Ever. Am I clear? She'd nodded mutely, too shocked and exhausted to argue. That night, alone in her childhood bedroom, surrounded by boxes containing the remnants of her adult life, Elizabeth had called Richard. Her hands shook as she dialed his number, desperate for comfort, for a reassurance that at least one part of her life remained intact. He'd answered on the fourth ring, his voice cautious. Elizabeth? Everything okay? No, she'd replied, her voice breaking. Nothing's okay. Michael found out about us. He sold our house, filed for divorce, disappeared. I've lost everything. There had been a long pause. Whoa, that's intense. I'm sorry to hear that. His tone was careful, detached. Can I come stay with you? She'd asked, hope flaring briefly. Just until I figure things out. Another pause, longer this time. I don't think that's a good idea, Liz. I mean, we had fun and all, but I'm not really looking for anything serious, especially not with someone going through a divorce. The hope had died as quickly as it had appeared. But you said, in California, you said when I left Michael, we could be together for real. Yeah, about that, Richard had hedged. I might have gotten carried away in the moment. You know how it is. She'd known then, with devastating clarity, that Richard had never intended for their affair to be anything more than a temporary diversion. He'd enjoyed the thrill of sneaking around with a married woman, the ego boost of being chosen over a husband. But the messy reality of a woman with no home, no money, and a broken marriage? That wasn't what he'd signed up for. I see, she'd said, her voice flat. So that's it. 3 weeks together, and now you're just done with me? Don't be like that, Liz, he'd replied, defensive now. You've got a lot going on. You need to focus on sorting out your situation, not jumping into something new with me. My situation, she'd repeated. You mean the situation I created partly because of you? Because of us? That's not fair, he'd protested. I never asked you to leave your husband. That was your call. But you were happy enough to sleep with me while I was married to him, she'd shot back, anger rising through her despair. Happy enough to make plans for when he was out of the picture. Look, I've got to go, Richard had said, clearly uncomfortable. Call me when things calm down, okay? Maybe we can grab a drink or something. Then he'd hung up, leaving Elizabeth alone with the realization that she had sacrificed her marriage, her home, her very sense of security for a man who had discarded her the moment she became inconvenient. The next morning, she checked her bank account to find the deposit from the house sale, a substantial sum, but cold comfort given what she'd lost to receive it. She'd also found an email notification of divorce proceedings, officially marking the end of her marriage to Michael Walker. Her world had collapsed in the span of 24 hours, leaving her shell-shocked and disoriented. The life she had taken for granted, the comfortable home, the stable marriage, Even the exciting affair had vanished overnight, replaced by boxes of belongings in a childhood bedroom that no longer felt like hers. In the days that followed, Elizabeth had spiraled further. She'd called in sick to work, unable to face her colleagues or clients in her current state. She'd tried repeatedly to find Michael, calling his friends, his former co-workers, even hiring a private investigator. But he had covered his tracks well. No one knew where he had gone, or if they did, they weren't telling her. Richard had stopped responding to her texts and calls entirely. His social media accounts showed him at a bar with another woman just 3 days after their last conversation, his arm draped possessively around her shoulders, his smile carefree and untroubled. Elizabeth had begun drinking heavily, starting with wine at dinner and progressing to vodka straight from the bottle by midday. Her parents watched with growing concern but uncertain how to help a daughter they barely recognized anymore. The final blow had come a week after her return, when she'd finally dragged herself into the office, only to be called immediately into her boss's office. "Elizabeth, we need to talk," Sandra had said, her expression grave. "Your unexplained absence last week, combined with the client complaints about missed appointments over the past few months, I'm afraid we're going to have to let you go." "Client complaints?" Elizabeth had repeated, genuinely confused. "What complaints?" "Multiple clients reported that you missed appointments or showed up unprepared," Sandra had explained. "You've been distracted, Elizabeth. Unreliable. That doesn't work in real estate." The truth had hit her like a physical blow. The times she'd called in sick to meet Richard, the appointments she'd rescheduled or forgotten entirely, the listings she'd neglected because she was too busy planning her California getaway. Just like her marriage, her career had been dying by inches while she was too wrapped up in her affair to notice. "I understand," she'd said, too numb to fight back. "I'll clean out my desk." That night, sitting on the floor of her childhood bedroom, surrounded by empty bottles and the boxes Michael had packed, Elizabeth had finally confronted the full scope of what she had lost. In her role in losing it, her marriage, her home, her lover, her job, her parents' respect, her self-respect, all gone because she had wished for the wrong person to disappear. She picked up the wedding photo she'd been avoiding looking at since her return. In it, she and Michael beamed at the camera, young and in love and full of hope for the future. She ran her finger over Michael's smiling face, tears streaming down her cheeks. "I'm sorry," she whispered to the empty room. "I'm so sorry." But there was no one there to hear her apology, no one to forgive her, no one to help her pick up the pieces of her shattered life. She was alone, completely, utterly alone, just as she had wished for Michael to be. Be careful what you wish for, indeed. In Boulder, I was starting to build a new life, unaware of the chaos I'd left in my wake. The mountain air was cleaner, the work more satisfying, the future brighter than it had been in years. I had joined a local hiking group, made friends with my neighbors, and thrown myself into my job with an enthusiasm that impressed even Dave, my demanding new boss. "You're a fine walker," he told me one afternoon as we reviewed plans for a custom home in the foothills. "Wish we'd snagged you years ago." I smiled, feeling a surge of pride and gratitude. "Thanks for taking a chance on me." "No chance about it," Dave replied. "Talent speaks for itself." The pain of Elizabeth's betrayal was still there, a dull ache that flared occasionally when something reminded me of her. A song on the radio, a glimpse of auburn hair in a crowd, the particular shade of green that matched her eyes. But it was manageable now, a wound that was slowly healing rather than a gaping hole in my chest. I had disappeared, just as she had wished, but in disappearing from her life, I had reappeared in my own. And that, I realized with each passing day, was the greatest victory of all. 3 months after my arrival in Boulder, my phone rang with an unfamiliar Texas number. I hesitated, then answered. "Hello? Michael, it's Margaret Davis." Elizabeth's mother. I sat down on my couch, heart suddenly racing. "Margaret, is everything okay?" A pause. "Not really, no." Her voice was tired, strained. "It's Elizabeth. She's not doing well." A complicated mixture of emotions swirled through me. Concern, resentment, a reflexive urge to help that I immediately suppressed. "I'm sorry to hear that," I said carefully, "but I'm not sure what you expect me to do about it." "I don't expect anything," Margaret said quickly. I thought you should know." She lost her job. She's been drinking heavily. Richard disappeared from her life as quickly as he appeared in it. She's talking about moving away, starting over somewhere else. She says there's nothing left for her here. I absorbed this information silently. Once it would have devastated me to hear about Elizabeth's suffering. Now I felt a strange detachment, as if she were a character in a story I'd read long ago. That sounds like a good plan, actually, I said finally. Starting over. It's working for me. Are you happy, Michael? Margaret asked softly. Out there in Colorado? I looked out my window at the mountains, silhouetted against the setting sun. I'm getting there, I replied honestly. It's not perfect, but it's mine. A life I'm building on my terms. I'm glad, she said, and I could hear the genuine warmth in her voice. You deserve that. Thank you. I hesitated, then asked the question that had been forming since I heard her voice. Why are you really calling, Margaret? Is Elizabeth asking you to find me? Another pause. No, she doesn't know I'm calling. She's not in a state to ask for anything right now. What do you mean? Margaret took a deep breath. She's in the hospital, Michael. She took some pills with alcohol. Her roommate found her. The news hit me like a physical blow. Is she going to be okay? Physically, yes. The doctors say she'll recover. Emotionally, Margaret trailed off. I don't know. She's lost, Michael. Completely lost. I closed my eyes, conflicting emotions warring within me. I'm sorry, Margaret, truly. But I can't come back. I can't be the one to save her from this. I know, she said quickly. I'm not asking you to. I thought you should know. And I wanted to make sure you're okay, that you're healing. The simple kindness in her voice brought unexpected tears to my eyes. I am, day by day. Good, she said. That's good. Take care of yourself, Michael. And if you ever want to talk about anything, we're here. After we hung up, I sat for a long time processing what I'd learned. Elizabeth had hit rock bottom, apparently, had tried to end her own life. The thought should have devastated me, and part of me was shocked and saddened. But another part, the part that had heard her wish for my disappearance, that had endured her contempt and betrayal, felt only a weary resignation. She had made her choices, just as I had made mine. Now we were both living with the consequences. That night I dreamed of Elizabeth for the first time since leaving Texas. In the dream, we stood on opposite sides of a vast canyon, too wide to cross. She was calling to me, but I couldn't hear her words. I woke feeling unsettled but resolute. The canyon between us wasn't just physical distance. It was the unbridgeable gap created by broken trust and deliberate cruelty. I had disappeared from her life, just as she had wished. And despite the complicated emotions stirred by Margaret's call, I had no intention of reappearing. In Texas, Elizabeth was facing the hardest journey of her life. After her suicide attempt and subsequent hospitalization, she had entered a rehabilitation facility at her parents' insistence. There, stripped of distractions and forced to confront the wreckage of her life, she began the painful process of self-examination. In group therapy sessions, she spoke haltingly about her marriage, her affair, her husband's disappearance, about the callous wish she had voiced, never imagining he would hear it, or grant it so completely, about the shock of returning to find her life dismantled, her lover disinterested, her parents disappointed, her very sense of self shattered. I destroyed everything, she admitted during one session, voice raw with emotion. Not because I was unhappy, but because I was bored, restless, entitled. I thought I deserved more excitement, more passion, more everything, and now I have nothing. The therapist had nodded. And what have you learned from this experience? Elizabeth had thought for a long moment. That you can't treat people like they're disposable. That words have power. That what you have can vanish in an instant if you don't value it. Simple truths, hard-earned through catastrophic loss. As the weeks passed, she began to rebuild herself from the ground up. She stopped trying to contact Richard, stopped searching for Michael, stopped blaming external forces for the consequences of her own actions. She got sober, found a new job, a modest apartment, a routine that kept her grounded, repaired her relationship with her parents through painful honesty and consistent effort. And she wrote letters to Michael, letters she never sent because she had no address to send them to, letters of apology, of explanation, of acceptance, that what she had broken could never be repaired. I wished for your disappearance, she wrote in one, never understanding that you were the foundation upon which my entire life was built. And when that foundation was removed, everything collapsed. I am only now learning to build again, from scratch, on firmer ground. A year after Operation Disappear, our divorce was final. The paperwork arrived at Elizabeth's new apartment on a Tuesday morning, requiring her signature to acknowledge the dissolution of our marriage. She signed with a steady hand, accepting the finality of it all. That evening, she placed her wedding ring in a small wooden box, along with the unsent letters and the single photograph she had kept. The two of us on our wedding day, smiling into an uncertain future that had ended more abruptly and painfully than either of us could have imagined. "Goodbye, Michael," she whispered, closing the box and placing it on a high shelf. "I hope you found the happiness I carelessly threw away." In Boulder, unaware of Elizabeth's journey toward recovery, I was building a life that increasingly felt like my own. My work at Mountain Ridge had led to a promotion to head carpenter. I had made friends, joined a recreational baseball league, even started dating occasionally. Nothing serious, but steps toward a future that might someday include partnership again. Sometimes in quiet moments, I thought about Elizabeth and wondered how she was doing, whether she had found a way forward from the wreckage of our marriage, whether she had learned anything from the experience. But these thoughts came less and less frequently as time passed. She had wished for my disappearance, and I had granted that wish more thoroughly than she could have imagined. In doing so, I had freed not only her from my irritating presence, but myself from the pain of loving someone who saw me as an inconvenience rather than a partner. Be careful what you wish for. It's an adage as old as time. Elizabeth had learned its truth the hard way, discovering that the absence she had so carelessly desired would create a void larger and more devastating than she could have anticipated. And I had learned that sometimes disappearing is not an act of defeat, but one of immense courage and self-preservation. That walking away from someone who doesn't value you can be the most powerful statement you ever make.